The Chicago wind whipped through my thin jacket as I stood outside Aunt Margaret's massive Lincoln Park mansion, staring up at the imposing brick facade. The autumn leaves crunched under my worn sneakers, and I could already hear the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filtering through the ornate windows. My stomach twisted into knots as I checked my reflection in my phone screen one more time, smoothing down my blonde hair that had gotten messy from the L-ride over. I was wearing my best outfit, a simple black sweater from Target that I'd bought on clearance last month, paired with dark jeans that had seen better days but were clean and presentable. My boots were from a thrift store in Wicker Park, scuffed but comfortable. To me, I looked fine. To my family, I knew I looked like exactly what they expected, the poor relation who couldn't afford to keep up with their lifestyle. Taking a deep breath of the crisp October air, I pressed the doorbell. The melodic chimes echoed through what I knew was a foyer larger than my entire studio apartment in Logan Square. Within seconds, the heavy oak door swung open to reveal my cousin Jessica, resplendent in what was obviously a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. "Oh, Nick, you made it!" Jessica's voice carried that particular tone of surprise that suggested she hadn't really expected me to show up. Her perfectly manicured nails clicked against her wine glass as she gestured for me to come in. "Everyone's already here. Come on, let's get you a drink." I stepped into the warmth of the house, immediately hit by the scent of expensive candles and whatever gourmet meal was being prepared in the kitchen. The living room was already full of my extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a Nordstrom catalog. The men wore crisp button-downs and designer sweaters, while the women sparkled in jewelry that caught the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. "Nick!" my cousin Brad called out from across the room, raising his glass of what looked like top-shelf whiskey. "There she is. Come over here, cuz." As I made my way through the crowd, I caught snippets of conversation about vacation homes in the Hamptons, new BMW leases, and someone's recent shopping trip to Milan. I felt like I was walking through a different world, one where money flowed as freely as the expensive wine being poured into crystal glasses. "So, Nick," my cousin Amanda said as I joined their circle, her eyes scanning my outfit with barely concealed judgment. "How's the freelance thing going? Still doing those little graphics projects?" The way she said little made my cheeks burn. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer for 3 years now, ever since I graduated from the University of Illinois with my degree in digital media. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't making me rich, but I was passionate about what I did and proud of the work I'd created for small businesses around Chicago. "It's going well," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just finished a project for a local restaurant chain. They loved the rebrand I created for them." "Oh, that sounds nice," Jessica chimed in, though her tone suggested she found it anything but impressive. "I just got promoted to senior marketing manager at that tech firm downtown. The salary increase was incredible. I'm finally going to be able to afford that condo in River North I've been eyeing." The conversation continued like this throughout the evening, with each family member sharing news of promotions, raises, new cars, and expensive purchases. I found myself growing quieter and quieter, sipping the cheap wine they'd given me while they enjoyed what was clearly a much more expensive vintage. Dinner was served in Aunt Margaret's formal dining room, complete with china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was seated between my teenage cousin Tyler and my uncle Robert, who spent most of the meal discussing his latest business acquisition. The food was incredible, some kind of fancy salmon with herbs I couldn't pronounce, but I could barely taste it over the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Nick, honey," Aunt Margaret said from the head of the table, her voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate, "you really should consider getting a more stable job. This freelance thing is fine for a hobby, but you're 25 now. Don't you want security, benefits, a real career?" Before I could respond, Amanda jumped in. "Oh, speaking of careers, did you guys see Sarah's new Instagram post? She just got back from that conference in Paris. Her company flew her first class." "Sarah always dresses so well for those business trips," Jessica added, and I felt all eyes turned to me. It's so important to look professional in corporate settings. The implication was clear, and I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment. I looked down at my simple sweater, suddenly feeling every thread of its Target origins. "Well," Tyler said with a smirk that reminded me painfully of his mother, "not everyone can afford designer clothes, right, Nick? I mean, there's nothing wrong with shopping at discount stores." The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter, and I felt something inside me crack. These people, my own family, were sitting here in their expensive clothes, in this mansion, making jokes about my financial situation like it was some kind of entertainment. "I shop where I can afford to shop," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the continuing chatter. "What was that, sweetie?" Aunt Margaret leaned forward with fake concern. "I said I shop where I can afford to shop." This time my voice was stronger, though I could feel tears threatening behind my eyes. The table fell silent for a moment before Brad cleared his throat. Hey, no judgment here, Nick. We all started somewhere. Maybe someday you'll be able to afford the nicer things too. The condescension in his voice was the final straw. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead found myself standing in the ornate powder room, staring at my reflection in the gold-framed mirror. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes bright with unshed tears. I looked exactly like what they saw, a girl who didn't belong in their world. But as I stood there, something shifted inside me. I thought about the project I'd been working on in secret for the past 6 months, the mobile app interface I'd designed that had caught the attention of some major players in the tech world. I thought about the calls I'd been getting, the meetings I'd been taking, the possibilities that stretched out before me like a road I was afraid to travel. Maybe it was time to take that road. I splashed cold water on my face, squared my shoulders, and walked back to the dining room. I'd endure the rest of this evening, but I made myself a promise. This would be the last time I let them make me feel small. Little did they know, everything was about to change. The next morning, I woke up in my Logan Square studio apartment, with the memory of last night's humiliation still burning in my chest. The thin walls of my building meant I could hear Mrs. Chen's morning news program filtering through from next door, mixing with the distant rumble of the Blue Line. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the water stain on my ceiling that I'd been meaning to report to my landlord for months. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from my mom asking how dinner at Aunt Margaret's went. I couldn't bring myself to respond yet. Instead, I rolled out of bed and padded across the small space to my makeshift office area. A desk I'd built from an old door and some filing cabinets, positioned near the single large window that faced west toward the distant Chicago skyline. This was where the magic happened. This was where I'd been pouring my heart and soul for the past 6 months into something that could change everything. I fired up my MacBook, a refurbished 2019 model I'd saved for months to buy, and opened the files that had become my obsession. Project Harmony, I called it. A mobile app interface designed specifically for small businesses to manage their customer relationships, inventory, and social media presence all in one seamless platform. The idea had come to me after working with dozens of small business owners who were frustrated by having to juggle multiple expensive software subscriptions. The interface was clean, intuitive, and beautiful. I'd spent countless nights perfecting every pixel, every transition, every user flow. While my family saw me as the poor cousin who couldn't afford designer clothes, I was actually creating something that could revolutionize how small businesses operated. My coffee maker gurgled to life as I reviewed the latest iteration of the design. The color palette was warm but professional, sage greens and soft blues that felt trustworthy and calming. The navigation was so intuitive that even the most tech-phobic business owner could figure it out within minutes. I'd tested it with my barista friend Jake at the coffee shop downstairs, with Maria who ran the bodega on the corner, with anyone who would give me 5 minutes of their time. The really beautiful part was the dashboard, a single screen that gave business owners everything they needed at a glance. Sales figures, inventory alerts, upcoming social media posts, customer feedback, all integrated into one cohesive experience. No more switching between 12 different apps, no more forgetting to update the Instagram account, no more losing track of which customers were due for follow-up calls. I'd been working on this in secret, afraid to tell anyone about it. My family would probably laugh if they knew I was trying to create something this ambitious. Nick thinks she's going to be the next Steve Jobs, I could practically hear Jessica saying with that condescending laugh of hers. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I'd submitted my portfolio to a startup competition called Chicago Tech Rising, more as a practice exercise than anything else. I never expected to hear back. Most of these competitions were dominated by Northwestern and University of Chicago MBA students, with connections and funding I could only dream of. So when I got the email asking me to present Project Harmony to a panel of investors and tech executives, I nearly dropped my phone in my morning coffee. The presentation was scheduled for this Friday, just 4 days away. I'd been practicing my pitch obsessively, standing in front of my bathroom mirror at all hours, trying to project confidence I didn't always feel. Good morning, my name is Nick Morrison, and I'm here to show you how Project Harmony can transform the way small businesses operate in the digital age. I'd practiced that opening line so many times that it came out automatically now. But my hands still shook every time I thought about standing in front of a room full of successful business people. My phone rang, interrupting my morning ritual. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, which usually meant a potential client, or more likely, a spam call. Hello, this is Nick, I answered, trying to sound more professional than I felt in my pajamas. Hi, Nick. This is David Chen from Meridian Ventures. I'm calling about your submission to Chicago Tech Rising. My heart stopped. Meridian Ventures was one of the biggest venture capital firms in Chicago. They'd funded companies that were now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Oh, hi, I managed, my voice probably an octave higher than normal. Thank you for calling. I wanted to reach out because I've been reviewing your Project Harmony submission, and I have to say, I'm impressed. The interface design is exceptional, and the market research you've included shows a real understanding of the pain points small businesses face. I was pacing around my tiny apartment now, trying to process what was happening. This was David Chen. I'd Googled him after seeing his name on the judging panel. He'd been featured in Forbes, Chicago Magazine, Crane's Business. He was calling me. Thank you so much, I said. I've put a lot of work into understanding what small business owners really need. That shows. Listen, I know your presentation isn't until Friday, but I wanted to ask if you'd be available to meet earlier. Say, tomorrow afternoon? I'd like to discuss some possibilities that might interest you. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it through the phone. Of course. I'm available whenever works for you. Great. How about 2 p.m. at our offices in the Loop? I'll send you the address. After we hung up, I stood in the middle of my apartment, barely able to believe what had just happened. David Chen from Meridian Ventures wanted to meet with me. About my project. About possibilities. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, alternating between excitement and terror. I researched everything I could find about Meridian Ventures, about David Chen, about other companies they'd invested in. I practiced my presentation until my voice was hoarse. I tried on every piece of clothing I owned, looking for something that would make me look like a serious businesswoman rather than a broke freelancer. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my family's faces at dinner, about Tyler's smirk when he made jokes about my discount shopping, about Aunt Margaret's patronizing advice about getting a real job. What if Project Harmony was about to become the most real job of all? The next morning, I put on my best professional outfit, a black blazer I'd found at a consignment shop in Andersonville, paired with my good jeans and the nicest flats I owned. I spent extra time on my makeup and hair, trying to project the confidence of someone who belonged in a downtown venture capital office. As I rode the red line toward the Loop, watching the familiar Chicago skyline grow larger through the train windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Maybe I was about to prove that the quiet cousin in the cheap clothes had something valuable to offer after all. The Meridian Ventures office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower in Chicago's Loop, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. As I stepped off the elevator onto the 32nd floor, I felt completely out of my element. The reception area was all polished marble and modern furniture that probably cost more than my annual rent. Nick Morrison? The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s wearing what was clearly an expensive suit, smiled warmly at me. Mr. Chen is ready for you. Right this way. My palms were sweating as I followed her down a hallway lined with framed articles about Meridian's success stories. I recognized some of the companies. Tech startups that had become household names, mobile apps that millions of people use daily. What was I doing here among these giants? David Chen's office was corner space with panoramic views of the city. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with an easy smile and the kind of casual confidence that came from years of making million-dollar decisions. He stood up from behind a massive desk to shake my hand. Nick, pleasure to meet you in person. Please have a seat. He gestured to a comfortable leather chair across from his desk. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Water would be great. Thank you. I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. As he poured water from a glass pitcher, I took a moment to collect myself. I'd rehearsed this meeting dozens of times, but sitting here in this intimidating office, all my preparation felt inadequate. So, David said, settling back into his chair, I've spent considerable time reviewing Project Harmony, and I have to tell you it's impressive. Really impressive. The user interface is clean and intuitive, your market research is thorough, and the business model is solid. Thank you, I said, feeling a flush of pride. I've been working on it for about 6 months, really trying to understand what small businesses need most. That shows. What I'm particularly impressed by is how you've identified a genuine gap in the market. Most business management software is either too complex for small business owners or too limited to be truly useful. You've found that sweet spot. He leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. I'm going to cut to the chase, Nick. Meridian Ventures would like to make you an offer for Project Harmony. My heart stopped. An offer. They wanted to buy my project. We're prepared to offer you $2.3 million for the complete rights to Project Harmony, including all your designs, research, and development work. The number hit me like a physical blow. $2.3 million. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was reeling. That was more money than I'd imagined seeing in my entire lifetime, let alone for a project I'd been working on in my tiny apartment. Additionally, David continued, we'd like to offer you a position as lead UX designer for the development team we'd be putting together. The salary would be $120,000 annually, plus equity in the company we'd be forming around your product. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. $2.3 million, plus a six-figure salary, plus equity. This was beyond my wildest dreams. Wow, I stammered. This is incredible. I wasn't expecting anything like this. David smiled. Your work speaks for itself. We see major potential in Project Harmony. With proper funding and development, we think it could capture a significant share of the small business software market. What would the timeline look like? I asked, trying to sound businesslike despite the fact that my hands were shaking. We'd want to move quickly. Sign the papers by the end of this week, get you set up with our development team by next Monday. We've already identified office space in River North where the team would be based. River North, the same neighborhood Jessica had been bragging about wanting to move to. The irony wasn't lost on me. This is an amazing opportunity, I said. I need to ask, why me? Why not develop something like this internally? David's expression grew more animated. Because you have something our internal teams don't have. Authentic understanding of your target market. You've worked with small businesses. You've lived their frustrations. That insight is invaluable, and honestly, it's not something we can just manufacture. He pulled out a tablet and showed me some projections. Conservative estimates put the potential market for this type of integrated business software at over $8 billion annually. Even capturing a small percentage of that market would be enormously successful. The numbers on the screen were staggering. I thought about my current income, the $30,000 I'd made last year cobbling together freelance projects, the months when I'd had to choose between groceries and rent, the countless nights I'd worked until 3 a.m. just to make ends meet. I need to think about this, I said, though every instinct was screaming at me to say yes immediately. Of course. Take your time. David handed me a folder thick with documents. Here's the full proposal, including all the terms and conditions. I'd recommend having a lawyer review everything. We're hoping to hear back from you by Thursday so we can move forward quickly. As I stood to leave, David shook my hand again. Nick, I want you to know that this isn't charity or some kind of favor. This is a solid business decision based on the quality of your work. You've created something genuinely valuable. The ride back to Logan Square felt surreal. I clutched the folder containing the offer, barely believing it was real. On the Red Line, surrounded by commuters heading home from their regular jobs, I felt like I was carrying a secret that could change everything. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents across my small kitchen table and read through every page. The legal language was dense, but the core terms were clear. $2.3 million for Project Harmony, plus a position that would make me financially secure for the first time in my adult life. I called my college friend Sarah, not my cousin Sarah, but my roommate from U of I who now worked as a paralegal downtown. She agreed to look over the contracts, and by evening she was sitting in my apartment with a bottle of wine, going through every clause. Nick, she said, looking up from the papers, this is legitimate. This is a real offer from a real company, and it's an incredibly good deal. You think I should take it? She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Are you kidding? This is life-changing money. This is never worry about rent again money. This is, your family will never look down on you again money. That last part hit me hard. My family. The people who'd spent years making me feel like a failure, like I was wasting my potential, like I'd never amount to anything significant. I thought about Aunt Margaret's patronizing advice about getting a real job, about Tyler's jokes about my discount shopping, about Jessica's condescending questions about my little graphics projects. They had no idea what was coming. I picked up my phone and called David Chen's direct number. David, this is Nick Morrison. I've reviewed the offer and I'd like to accept. Fantastic! I'll have our legal team prepare the final documents. Can you come in Thursday morning to sign everything? I'll be there. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking around at the space that had been my whole world for the past 3 years. The water-stained ceiling, the makeshift desk, the kitchen table where I'd just negotiated the deal that would change my life forever. In less than a week, I'd be a millionaire. In less than a week, I'd have a 6-figure job with one of Chicago's most prestigious firms. In less than a week, everything would be different. But first, I had a family dinner to attend. And this time, I was going to make an entrance they'd never forget. Thursday morning, I walked into Meridian Ventures wearing the same consignment store blazer I'd worn to my first meeting, but this time it felt different. I wasn't the desperate freelancer hoping for a chance anymore. I was about to become a millionaire. The contract signing took 2 hours. Page after page of legal documents, signatures, initials, and handshakes that transferred ownership of my life's work and simultaneously transformed my entire future. When David Chen handed me the final copy with all the signatures, I had to resist the urge to pinch myself. "Welcome to the Meridian family, Nick," he said with a genuine smile. "Your first day as lead UX designer is Monday. We'll have your office ready and your team assembled." Walking out of that building, I felt like I was floating. The September afternoon sun felt warmer, the Chicago skyline looked more beautiful, and even the usual downtown traffic seemed less chaotic. I had done it. I had actually done it. But as I rode the red line back to Logan Square, a different kind of excitement began building in my chest. Aunt Margaret's monthly family dinner was this Sunday, just 3 days away. The same gathering where, less than 2 weeks ago, my cousins had made jokes about my cheap clothes and suggested I needed to get a real job. This time was going to be very different. I spent Friday morning at the bank, watching in amazement as numbers I'd never dreamed of appeared in my account balance. The wire transfer from Meridian had gone through, and after taxes and Sarah's legal fees, I was looking at more money than I'd ever imagined having. My first stop was Nordstrom on Michigan Avenue. I'd walked past this store hundreds of times, usually just window shopping or cutting through to catch the train. Now I walked through the doors with purpose. "Can I help you find anything?" asked a sales associate, a polished woman in her 40s who probably earned more in commission than I used to make in a year. "I need a complete outfit for a special dinner," I said, trying to project confidence. "Something elegant, but not flashy. I want to look successful, but understated." She led me through the designer section, pulling pieces that I'd only seen in magazines. A charcoal gray dress from Theory that hugged my figure perfectly. A cashmere blazer in deep navy that felt like wearing a cloud. Italian leather heels that made me 3 inches taller and infinitely more confident. "This necklace would be perfect," she said, holding up a simple gold chain with a small pendant. Subtle, but sophisticated. When she rang everything up, the total was more than I used to spend on clothes in an entire year. I handed over my credit card without flinching. Next stop was a high-end salon in Lincoln Park, not far from Aunt Margaret's house. I'd never spent more than $30 on a haircut in my life, but today I was getting the full treatment. Cut, color, styling, everything Jessica and Amanda took for granted. "What are we doing today?" asked Marcus, the stylist who'd been assigned to me. "I want to look like the most successful version of myself," I said. "I have an important dinner on Sunday, and I need to make an impression." 3 hours later, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My blonde hair had been cut into a sleek bob that framed my face perfectly, with subtle highlights that caught the light. My makeup was professionally done. Not overdone, but polished in a way I'd never achieved on my own. Saturday, I tackled the logistics. I called Elite Chicago Limousine and booked their best car for Sunday evening, a black Mercedes S-Class with a professional driver named James, who had 20 years of experience with high-end corporate clients. "What time should I pick you up, Ms. Morrison?" James asked when he called to confirm the details. "Actually, I'd like you to pick me up at my apartment at 5:30, but I want to arrive at the destination at exactly 6:15. I want to make sure everyone's already there when I arrive." "Of course." "And the address?" I gave him Aunt Margaret's Lincoln Park address, imagining the looks on my neighbors' faces when a luxury limousine pulled up outside my modest apartment building. Sunday afternoon, I began getting ready with the care of someone preparing for the most important performance of their life. I started with a long bath, using expensive bath oils I'd bought just for this occasion. I did my own makeup, trying to recreate what the professional had done, and managed to get pretty close. The Theory dress fit like it had been made for me. The cashmere blazer added just the right touch of sophistication. The Italian heels made me feel powerful, like I could conquer the world. The gold necklace caught the light perfectly. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the same mirror where I'd practiced my pitch for Project Harmony just weeks ago, and for the first time in my life, I looked like I belonged in my family's world. At 5:25, I got a text from James. "Arriving in 2 minutes, Ms. Morrison." I grabbed my purse, a new leather bag from Coach that had cost more than my rent, and headed downstairs. Through the lobby window, I could see the sleek black Mercedes idling outside, looking completely out of place on my quiet Logan Square street. Mrs. Chen from next door was checking her mail and did a double take when she saw me walk out to the limousine. James, immaculate in his black suit, opened the door for me with professional courtesy. "Good evening, Ms. Morrison. Ready for your dinner?" "Ready," I said, settling into the plush leather seats. As we drove through Chicago toward Lincoln Park, I watched the familiar city pass by through tinted windows. I thought about all the times I'd taken the L to family gatherings, arriving windblown and slightly frazzled from public transportation. I thought about standing outside Aunt Margaret's house in my Target sweater, steeling myself for another evening of condescension and judgment. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I wasn't the poor cousin anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Hope you can make it tonight. Mom's making her famous lamb." I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As we turned onto Aunt Margaret's tree-lined street, I could see the familiar warm glow from the windows of her mansion. Cars were already parked along the street. Brad's new Audi, Amanda's BMW, my Uncle Robert's Mercedes. All the usual suspects were here. "Should I wait for you, Ms. Morrison?" James asked as we pulled up to the house. "Actually, yes. I have a feeling this dinner might not last as long as usual." I checked my reflection one more time in the limousine's mirror. The successful, polished woman looking back at me was someone my family had never met before. She was someone who commanded respect, who had earned her place at any table. It was time to introduce her to the family. James opened my door, and I stepped out onto the sidewalk in front of Aunt Margaret's house. Through the windows, I could see figures moving around inside, the same scene I'd walked into dozens of times before. But this time, they were going to be the ones left speechless. This time, I was coming home as a winner. At exactly 6:15 p.m., James pulled the limousine up to the front of Aunt Margaret's mansion. Through the windows, I could see the dinner party in full swing, the same familiar scene of my family gathered around expensive wine and conversation about their latest acquisition. "Here we go," I whispered to myself, taking one last deep breath. James opened my door with practiced professionalism, and I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sound of the heavy car door closing echoed down the quiet Lincoln Park street, and I noticed a few neighbors peeking through their windows at the luxury vehicle. I walked up the stone pathway in my Italian heels, feeling more confident with each step. The same doorbell chimes rang through the house, but this time when the door opened, it was my Uncle Robert who answered. His expression went from polite greeting to complete shock in about 2 seconds. "Nick?" His voice cracked slightly. Did you just get out of a limousine?" "Hi, Uncle Robert," I said with a smile, stepping into the foyer. "Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Traffic was terrible coming from downtown." The conversation in the living room died abruptly as I appeared in the doorway. Jessica was mid-sentence, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Amanda's eyes went wide, scanning my outfit from head to toe. Brad nearly choked on his whiskey. "Nick!" Aunt Margaret exclaimed, rising from her chair. Wow. You look absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the air kiss she offered. "This dress? It's theory. I picked it up yesterday." The silence that followed was deafening. My family, who were never at a loss for words, especially when it came to commenting on my appearance, seemed to have forgotten how to speak. "That's a beautiful necklace," Amanda finally managed, her voice higher than usual. "Thank you. It's from Tiffany." I touched the gold pendant lightly. I treated myself to a little shopping spree this week. Tyler, now 17 and even more obnoxious than he'd been 2 weeks ago, was the first to recover his voice. "Shopping spree? What did you do? Win the lottery or something?" I laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even me. "Something like that." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Nick, what's going on? Did you get a new client or something? That limousine outside, that has to cost hundreds of dollars just for the night." "Oh, that's James," I said casually, walking over to pour myself a glass of wine. I noticed they'd given me the good stuff this time, without even thinking about it. "He's my driver for the evening. Professional courtesy from Meridian Ventures." The name dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. "Meridian Ventures?" Uncle Robert repeated slowly. "The investment firm?" "That's the one." I took a sip of wine, savoring both the expensive vintage and the looks of confusion spreading across my family's faces. Brad leaned forward. "Nick, what does Meridian Ventures have to do with you?" I set down my wine glass and looked around the room at these people who had spent years making me feel small, worthless, like I was the family charity case they had to tolerate out of obligation. "Well," I said, "they bought my mobile app design for $2.3 million and offered me a position as lead UX designer at $120,000 a year, plus equity." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Amanda was the first to break. "What did you just say?" "You heard me correctly. The little graphics projects you've all been so dismissive of? One of them just made me a multimillionaire." Jessica's face had gone pale. That's not possible. You work from your apartment, you shop at Target." "I worked from my apartment," I corrected. "And I shopped at Target because I was putting every spare dollar into developing something that actually mattered, instead of wasting money on designer clothes to impress people who were going to judge me anyway." The room erupted in a chaos of voices. $2.3 million? For an app? I don't understand. When did this happen? I held up my hand and surprisingly, they all fell silent. For the past 6 months, while you've all been making jokes about my cheap clothes and suggesting I get a real job, I've been creating something called Project Harmony. It's a business management platform for small companies, and apparently it's exactly what the market has been waiting for. Aunt Margaret sank back into her chair. Nick, honey, I had no idea you were working on something so significant. Of course you didn't, I said, my voice remaining calm and measured. None of you ever asked. You were all too busy assuming I was a failure because I didn't drive a BMW or carry a designer purse. Tyler, who had been suspiciously quiet, finally spoke up. So you're actually rich now? I'm financially secure, I replied, which means I'll never again have to sit through a dinner where my own family makes jokes about my shopping habits or treats me like I'm the poor relation you have to tolerate. The words hung in the air like smoke. I could see the shame starting to creep across their faces as they realized what they'd been doing for years. Jessica was the first to try to backtrack. Nick, we never meant to make you feel bad. We worry about you, that's all. Worry? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You worry about me? Or did you just enjoy having someone to look down on? Amanda jumped in. That's not fair. We're family. We've always supported you. Supported me? I set down my wine glass with a sharp click. 2 weeks ago, at this very table, Tyler made jokes about my discount shopping while the rest of you laughed. You, Amanda, called my work little graphics projects like I was playing with crayons. And you, Aunt Margaret, told me I needed to get a real job. The room fell silent again. I could see my words hitting their target, could see them remembering their own behavior with new clarity. The truth is, I continued, I didn't need your support. I needed your respect. And the only way I could get that, apparently, was to show up in a limousine wearing a $1,000 dress. Uncle Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Nick, if we made you feel unwelcome or unappreciated, I apologize. That was never our intention, wasn't it? I challenged, because from where I sat, it felt very intentional. It felt like you all needed someone to be the unsuccessful one so you could feel better about yourselves. Brad, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. What happens now? I looked around the room one more time, at these people who had shaped so much of my insecurity and self-doubt over the years. Now I start my new job on Monday. I move into a beautiful apartment in River North. I live my life without constantly feeling like I have to prove my worth to people who should have valued me regardless of my bank account. I picked up my purse and started toward the door. Nick, wait! Jessica called after me. You're not leaving, are you? We haven't even had dinner yet. I turned back to face them one last time. You know what? I think I've had enough family dinners for a while. I'm going to go have a quiet meal somewhere where I don't have to worry about being judged for my choices. As I walked toward the front door, I heard Aunt Margaret's voice behind me, smaller than I'd ever heard it before. Nick, we're proud of you. We really are. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Thank you for saying that. I just wish you'd been proud of me before you knew about the money. Outside, James was waiting by the limousine, professional as always. How did the dinner go, Ms. Morrison? Shorter than expected, I said as he opened the door for me, but exactly as necessary. As we drove away from Lincoln Park, I looked back one last time at the mansion where I'd spent so many uncomfortable evenings. The warm glow from the windows looked the same, but everything else had changed forever. My phone buzzed with text messages. Jessica, Amanda, even Tyler, all trying to reach out, to apologize, to somehow undo years of condescension with a few quick words. I turned my phone face down and watched the Chicago skyline approach through the limousine windows. Tomorrow I would start my new life, my real life, as someone who had earned her place in the world through talent and hard work, rather than family connections or inherited wealth. I'd proven my worth to the people who doubted me, but more importantly, I'd finally proven it to myself. The girl in the cheap Target sweater was gone forever. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth,